Growing up I had a dream, something no one else could see. Tell me what it means when your faith is falling beneath your knees and you can't breathe. Everything you see reminds you of what you're not or something you won't be. You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians.
Hello everyone, so welcome to the first of many educational videos going on to the VICI Strength YouTube channel. We're going to create a little mini series where we talk about all things powerlifting, strength training and hypertrophy. So whether it's programming, which is a topic today, right through to technique, reviews, whatever it may be, we're going to cover it in this channel in individual topics. I'm going to aim for 1 to 2 videos a month and similar just to this video exactly. So what we're going to cover today, based on the title of the video, is a programming aspect for powerlifting, which is very, very important, which is called Dynamic Correspondence, right? And we're specifically going to be looking at exercise selection, how we can improve exercise selection, individualize exercise selection, and get more return from your investment when it comes to your training and your progression over time. So what is dynamic correspondence? It's just a fancy way of saying and like judging how specific an exercise in your program is to the outcome of your sport. And this does not just have to be squat, bench, deadlift and their variations, it can also be accessory exercises too. So for a powerlifter, and we're going to be talking specifically powerlifting programming today, is how specific and how much of a carryover are we going to get from the exercises that we perform in the gym to our meet day 1 rep max. Okay, so that's what dynamic correspondence is going to entail. Basically how much of a carryover, how much of a transfer effect does every exercise in the program that we run have to our 1 rep max and our ability to improve our 1 rep max. And it's a very important aspect of programming when it comes to long-term progression, setting up training, periodizing training, but also accounting for multiple goals in a program too, because often I find like a lot of clients that come to me for coaching, you know, everyone has multiple things that they'd like to work on, and 9 times out of 10 it is going to be some sort of like physique goal with strength, or, you know, 2 performance style goals, whether someone plays a sport with powerlifting or whatever this may be. And when we look at dynamic correspondence within an exercise program, we can fine tune the program itself to allow for multiple goals to be worked towards without kind of just winging it and just throwing whatever in the program and hoping that it works. We can be structured in our approach, smart in our approach to the results that we want. So that is exactly what dynamic correspondence is within a program. It's how much of a transfer effect we get from the exercises we perform to our 1 rep max. And we're going to cover a lot more in this video. Okay, so when we look at dynamic correspondence, now that we understand exactly what that is, it's the transfer effect. How can we kind of view exercise programming? So when it comes to powerlifting, the more specific the exercise that we perform to our competition lifts, typically the more of a carryover we're going to see. So, and a couple of examples that I'm going to throw in here just like off the bat is a squat that is a 3-second tempo down, 3-second tempo up is going to have less of a carryover than a squat with just a 3-second down and an explosive up out of the hole, because it's more specific. A squat that has a 2-second tempo on the way down is going to have more of a carryover than a squat that has a 4-second tempo on the way down. Regular bench press with a pause is going to have more of a carryover effect than a Larson bench press. You can see how the more variable and the more modifications we have to our comp lift, whether it's based on tempo, it could be beltless, it could be manipulation of bar position, it could be grip width. When we start to manipulate all these different variables, we typically see less of a carryover effect to 1 rep max strength than we do with exercises that are very specific that might only have 1 modification or none, like comp bench, comp squat and comp deadlift are going to give us the most reward when it comes to the carryover effect for getting stronger long term. So now that we understand kind of that aspect and how it sets up with programming, what are the 3 main benefits of abiding by these kind of principles and understanding it and utilizing it in a program? So number 1 is going to be load management, and that is going to be one of the biggest, most important factors when it comes to dynamic correspondence and understanding this. So what I mean by load management is typically when we have more of a variable exercise, when we have an exercise with more modifications, you know, so more than 2 or 3 modifications, we're talking pauses, grip, width, bar position, tempo, beltless, sleeveless, whatever it may be. When we start to make all these modifications to our exercises, we are less specific to the main lift. However, what does that exercise actually do when we add more modifications? It makes the exercise harder it makes it a lot more relatively difficult, so we can't lift as much weight as we usually would on our comp deadlift or our comp bench or our comp squat. And therefore that manages the load that we're lifting in that training week, in that session, in that set. The amount of load that we use is a lot less, so this can be really, really useful when it comes to load management for people who are further away from competition, who are going through stressful and really busy periods of their lives, who are fighting like injuries and rehabilitation and trying to get through like, you know, pain in the gym. There's a lot of different reasons why load management is important. And when we start to look at that dynamic correspondence and have less specific exercises, yes, the carryover effect mightn't be as good as it is in our competition lifts, but they still serve a purpose for load management earlier in the block when we're starting to look at the benefits of that. So whilst a 3-second beltless tempo high bar squat isn't going to have a carryover effect to your competition squat as great as the comp squat itself, it's going to serve in a role of load management. It's going to be reducing the load that you lift in that session. It's going to allow you to tackle them skills that we just talked about. The second benefit to kind of abiding by these principles is going to be skill-specific outcomes. And what I mean by skill-specific outcomes is going to be more so the technique on the squat, bench, and deadlift. So a lot of people have technique issues. Everyone does. Whether they're small, whether they're large, everyone will have some form of issue with their SBD or something that comes out under heavier loads, you know, over 85%. That could be classed as like a technique flaw. It could be the hips rising in a squat. It could be the hips rising first in the deadlift. It could be ass lifting off on the bench. It could be elbow flare really early on the bench. There's a lot of different things, and it's all specific to the individual. When it comes to dynamic correspondence and looking at exercises that are more variable and less specific to the comp lifts, the second benefit to this is also going to be skill related and how we can actually manipulate exercise selection and exercise execution to target certain aspects of a competition lift. So for example, a really simple one is people who struggle out of the hole in the squat, who hips rise up or they lose tension in the bottom. Really simple, a pause squat could help that person. For someone whose bar path suffers and they lose position in that last bottom part of the squat, a pin squat at that position that they really, really suffer could be very, very beneficial. For someone on bench, for someone who struggles with strength off the chest, then a wide grip Larsen press could possibly help with this person generating force and getting stronger in the position off the chest. So we can manipulate exercises to target certain difficulties in a main lift. And that is the second reason why dynamic correspondence, understanding how this is less specific, can also help the lifter. Now, the third benefit to this kind of principle as well, and this is the benefit that we're going to be talking about now for the duration of this video and why it's so important, is basically elongating a runway of progression. In a simple way is getting more out of your training block, you know, setting yourself up for a long, successful block, giving yourself space to grow week on week, block on block, and progress, okay? So if you start off a block or an off season too specific, okay? If you start off a block that is just all competition lifts and it's all heavy weight and the load and the amount of stress you're accumulating per week is high, you're leaving yourself very little room to grow into following weeks and blocks of training. Whereas if you start a training block with more variation, more modifications to the lift, less dynamic correspondence, the transfer effect might be a little bit less, but we're able to focus on that load management and that skill aspect of the SBD. But what that does, at the start of a training block, being more variable gives you room to actually progress in specificity over the course of a block. It's going to elongate progression and allow you to focus on multiple aspects of progression as well. So it's not just, like I said, caring about 1 rep max strength on the squat, bench, and deadlift. We could be looking at things like hypertrophy, body composition, and like I talked about there was the skill-specific side of SBD as well. And having more of these mods and variable exercises in a program can help you build all them qualities and skill, but just elongate that progression, you know, elongate that runway, like give yourself more room to grow. And you'll notice that due to the load management being lower, or like more of an emphasis at the start, more skill specific, by the time you actually get to a stage where you're more specific in training, it might be a couple of blocks in, where the variations turn more into comp lifts, you'll find that all the qualities that you've just acquired in the start of that training block and in the start of that macro cycle will have a very good effect on the SBD from a technique standpoint. The load management that you kind of successfully went through will have a really good benefit on your capacity and your mentality towards working out. and then harder phases, and then you'll be able to push a lot harder long term as well. So that is what we're going to focus on in this video. I'm going to be talking now about how we can actually use dynamic correspondence to get the most out of a training block. Right, so when we look at exercises in the gym, how can we kind of put this into action? How can we progress this long term? How can we get that elongated progression scheme? How can we focus on these qualities? What does that look like visually from an exercise standpoint? So a really couple of easy examples I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you one for squat, one for bench press, and one for deadlift. When it comes to squat, an exercise that has 2 or 3 more modifications is going to have a less of a dynamic transfer effect to the 1RM than an exercise with 0 to only 1 modifications on that lift. So when we look at the squat, for example, if we program a squat that is beltless with a 3-second eccentric, a 1-second pause, and a 3-second concentric, we could start the block with that. There's 4 modifications on that lift. So we've no belt, the eccentric, the pause, and the concentric. That's 4 mods. That's going to have less of a dynamic transfer. In fact, it manages load really well though, and there's a lot of skill aspect that we can bring up from that. So that would be a really good exercise for building up someone's bar path, positioning and coordination in the squat. Now, as the block progresses, we want to reduce the modifications and gain specificity and increase that dynamic correspondence over time. So we go from the beltless 3 down, 1 pause, 3 up to a beltless 3 down, 1 pause, 0 up. So we're exploding up. The following block, we go from a beltless 3 down, 0 pause, 0 up, so nice and strong. Then we put a belt on the following block, have a 2-second eccentric, and drive up. And then the block after that, we're into competition style squats, so there's no specific tempo, and we'll have our belt on as well. So we reduce the modifications to a lift over time. We get a lot of a higher transference effect, but we've also built up a lot of qualities and skills that you might not have if you only stuck to competition lifts earlier on in the block, and it's going to set you up for, again, that successful strength block from all the building that you've done previous. So that's an example from a squatting standpoint, and it doesn't have to be that exact. It could be anything, but that's just an example. When it comes to deadlifts, we could look at a simple progression scheme being beltless, deficit, deadlifts. Then we have belted, deficit, deadlifts. Then we have deficit deadlifts, and then we go to a competition squat or deadlift. So there's 4 modifications that you can make over 4 blocks or 4-week blocks or whatever that may be. It's a very short space of time too. You can get a lot of work done within 12 to 24 weeks, a lot of progression done to set you up for like a big successful test or competition or whatever this may be. So that's another example there. And when we look at bench press, an example of this could be, you might start off with a close grip, 2-second pause, Larsen press. Okay, so 3 modifications. We have the feet up, 2-second pause, and we have the close grip. That's 3 modifications. Then we go to close grip Larsen press with a 1-second pause. Then we go to close grip on its own, so not into the Larsen, and then we go to a comp squat. So again, see how we can progress the specificity of an exercise over time. It's very important. All them benefits happen at the start. With the close grip Larsen with a 2-count pause, we're managing load because we're not able to lift as much weight. We're also working on a lot of different qualities in that exercise that we wouldn't get in the competition squat or bench press, but we are working towards that long term as well. So that is kind of 3 examples of squat, bench, and deadlift. And the most important thing too is to remember, it should be hyper specific to you. You should know exactly what your limitations are, what your weaknesses are, what you need to focus on squat, bench, and deadlift, where your form breaks down whenever you're pushing heavy weights. Do you have any injuries? Do you have any pain? These exercises should not just be thrown in because. They should be thrown in, and you should have them that variable effect for specific reasons, working on your own weaknesses and then building up slowly from that weaknesses, from that variation to comp lifts, and hope that the benefit that you targeted earlier in the block, the weaknesses specific to you that you targeted, will now be improved when you go to the competition lifts again. So that is 3 examples of dynamic correspondence and how you can gain specificity over time and get more of a carryover effect, but also understanding the benefits you got from doing that less specific work, even though it doesn't have a great carryover effect to 1 rep max strength. Now, another very important thing to remember is that this isn't specific to just squat, bench press, and deadlift. It's not just specific to the competition lifts. This is a term that is used in all sports, okay? So it's not just specific to SBD or powerlifting. It's a concept that caters to all sports. So for a powerlifter, for people in strength sports, it also does apply to accessory movements too, and this is where a lot of people go wrong. People just throw accessories in for the crack nowadays. I just see it happen for the crack. A lot of people just throw accessories in because it hits a certain muscle group or something that's just very, very vague. When we look at dynamic correspondence for accessories, a couple of different things that you should take on and consider here. So number one is that accessories can increase in specificity over time as well, and gain more of that kind of transference effect to our competition lifts, okay? And they can be more variable. They can work on different aspects and different weaknesses of yourself, which is the second reason. So accessories shouldn't just be thrown in vaguely. You can choose accessories that bring up specific weaknesses in your movement, in your execution, in your technique, in your mobility. There's a lot of different things that you can consider when it comes to accessory selection that's going to help you create a better you, essentially. So they should be specific still. They shouldn't just be thrown in there. And a couple of examples, like the differences in accessory exercise will be like, a rear foot elevated split squat is going to bias more external rotation and extension of the hip based on how you set it up. A front foot elevated split squat based on how you set it up can bias more hip flexion and internal rotation. So it's understandable, if I have a client, if I have someone who lacks something specific at the hip, then I'm going to cater a split squat specific to help improve that. A lot of people just throw Bulgarian split squats into a program. A lot of coaches just throw Bulgarians in because it grows their quads. That's just too vague for me, and it happens all the time. There's no intent, there's no reasoning really. And this is also another reason why a lot of people just don't give a shit about their accessories. It's because their coach and their program it's not seen as such an important factor from the get-go. So the intent that they have behind that is just it's only accessories, it's only this, it's only that. So we can also look at bicep curls, for example. A lot of people, I guarantee 90% of people just have a hammer curl in the program. But when we look at how we can manipulate a bicep curl to improve mobility, stability at joints in your shoulder, if someone lacks shoulder stability, primarily their scapula and being able to control their scapula on the rib cage and target their serratus anterior muscle. So if that's like a weakness, a high cable bicep curl where you have the cable set up, we're in this position, we're in a scapular plane position, so this scaption position, we're utilizing our serratus to keep our shoulder blade hiked up and forward. If we perform a bicep curl in there, we're gaining all the benefits from shoulder stability at the same time of training biceps. If I have someone who lacks shoulder extension, someone who struggles to get into a low bar squat position, we can do an incline bicep curl. So you have the bench on an incline and you perform bicep curls to free up some range of motion in the shoulder, specifically an extension to help someone feel comfortable in a low bar squat. There's loads of different ways that we can be more, bring more intent and be more specific with our accessories to create a better outcome for a client. And it's just not seen enough in the industry. So when it comes to accessories and dynamic correspondence, like an example of this would be if someone started off with a split squat, a contralateral split squat, okay, with a dumbbell. So contralateral means if your left leg's forward working where right arm holds the dumbbell. It's the opposite sides. We can have this in at the start of a training block. It's going to be less specific and have less of a carryover effect because, number one, the load is very low. And we're also going to be targeting different qualities. So contralateral split squat can help us avoid rotation of the spine when we're performing that. So if someone has issues resisting rotation in a squat or a deadlift or something like that, simply contralateral loading in the split squat can help them avoid rotation. It's going to train that movement aspect at the core and hopefully have a carryover effect to our SBD. Then as the block goes on, we can go from a contralateral to a bilateral, so two hands holding it. We take that stability requirement out and we're able to load more weight, right? We go from that bilateral split squat to a rear foot elevated, so a Bulgarian split squat with a bilateral. More range of motion, and we're lifting more weight because we're bilateral. We go from the dumbbells to a Hatfield split squat. So that's the safety squat bar on your back and your performance split squats. That's going to be like one of the most specific split squat variations we can get to that SBD. We're able to lift a lot more weight. We'll have a big barbell on our back, and likelihood is we're also assisted too, so we're less stability requirements. And that's going to have a greater carryover dynamic correspondence to squat and deadlift than a contralateral lighter dumbbell split squat. Okay, so things can be progressed over time. It's the same as like a high incline chest press to a small incline chest press to a flat chest press. We're able to press a lot more flat, but it's more specific to the position that we're in bench press to have a greater carryover effect. So there's a lot of different ways that we can do this, and it should be taken into consideration when building out your powerlifting program, especially when it comes to accessories. And you'll find that your results on SBD will fly up, your intent, your enjoyment with accessories will fly up because you're actually treating them like they're important because they are. So when we put this all together and try and plan out a year, it doesn't even have to be a year of training, it just comes out just planning training. It's when you really reap the rewards of like this dynamic correspondence. You can map out up to a year of training and take this principle into consideration. So what I do for all my clients is I periodize their training, of course, like any great coach does. You want to map out a full, pretty much like a season or whatever you may be. You map out from now to your next competition date or your next 2 competitions. Knowing an exact time frame and having that top-down approach is very beneficial for showing you how much time you have in training. So how much time you actually have between now and your competition. That will then allow you to bias what is needed to improve squat, bench, and deadlift, because that is the main goal. If you're further out from comp, if I have a client that's 30 plus weeks out from competition, we are reverse engineering that top-down approach, and it's going to give us a lot of information and clarity as to what we can focus on, how much time we can dedicate to skill-specific lifts, how much time we should be spending managing this load and building up these skills and not worrying too much about that dynamic correspondence, and then how long we also have and how long we want to be in phases that are highly specific to get stronger. Okay, so it allows you to really map out a full season. So whenever you're periodizing your training long term, yes, you should look at your end goal and know how far out you are and break it down into strength blocks and volume blocks, whatever way you do it. But you also need to be looking at what does this mean for exercise selection. It means that yes, at the start of a block you're less specific, more modifications, less dynamic correspondence, but we're building all these other qualities, and then over time you do gain specificity in your lifts, less modifications, higher dynamic correspondence, more results. Planning out this long term with your periodization can help you find out how long you have for each specific goal, how long you have for each specific outcome, what the block goal actually is. A lot of people don't actually establish goals for individual blocks. It's not always just to improve E1 or M. A lot of times there's a lot of other skills that need focus on too, especially earlier in blocks. So it allows you to just be real structured, organized with your training, and understand what the goal of each block is, what the outcome is going to be, what you're working towards, how it's different than the following block, and also how it sets up the following block for success as well. So you can map out a long-term training plan using this dynamic correspondence to improve exercise selection and results. So yeah, I hope you took from this video. This, like I said, is going to be the first video of this educational series that we're going to be running over the next, not even over the next, I'm just going to be running this. This is the new thing. 1 to 2 videos every single month at a minimum, covering a lot of different educational aspects to strength training, powerlifting, hypertrophy, getting bigger, getting stronger, getting more explosive, and just being a better you, whatever that may be. We're going to bring all the content to you. So I hope you did find this useful. Dynamic correspondence, what it means, how we can use it to our ability to progress better in the gym. It's something that I take into consideration for every single one of our clients. So if you want a coach that takes this into consideration, someone that covers all this basis for you, do not hesitate to reach out. If you'd like to jump on a call or absolutely anything, shoot me a message on Instagram or fill out the link or check out our website. There's a lot of different ways that you can get in contact, and we can get a good chat in as well. So like I said, I hope you found this interesting. If you have any questions on it and would like to chat further as well, please do not hesitate to reach out. I love having conversations about these types of things with people as well. It can be highly productive for both people. So yeah, hope you enjoyed. Keep your eyes peeled for the next one.
Growing up, I had a dream, something no one else could see. Tell me what it means when your faith is falling beneath your knees and you can't breathe. Everything you see reminds you of what you're not or something you won't be. You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose